Okay, well, before I begin, we have got a number of slides to get through, and there's going to be quite a lot of talking out at you, but actually we're going to change the voices a little bit during the session, and we'll be hearing from two or three of the partners, well, 3 or 4 of the partners in Wales who are playing a part in helping COF, Community Ownership Fund, reach its target audience of communities across Wales. So in the Zoom room at the moment, we'll be hearing from Alan Jones, Associate Investment Team at WCVA, Carly and Hannah both at Compass on Social Business Wales and Community Shares, and we have Adam Hitchings with us from Architectural Heritage Fund. And if we see somebody from the Welsh Government pop in, then we'll probably put them on when talking about the Community Facilities Fund as well. So you'll hear a few other voices, but sadly you'll hear quite a lot of my voice during this afternoon. We are going to accept the fact that the questions will arise in all sorts of places, but if you're happy, if you can type questions in the chat as and when they arise, we'll try and get through the presentation in sort of 3 bite-sized chunks. So we've set sort of an agenda that's got 4 items on it, but it'll really run in 3 parts. So the overview of the Community Ownership Fund and the support programme will really be about the COF and the programme, and questions around that. We probably take about 10-15 minutes to get that information out to you, and then we can take questions on the programme itself. 2 and 3 we're sort of going to run together. These are the other voices about some context in Wales, Welsh-based support, and a little bit about Wales can be on offered from the partnership across the UK. And we can take a few questions on that. And then we get into the meat of this afternoon session, which is taking you through probably what is the meatiest and chunkiest part of going for this thing called Community Ownership Fund, which is a management case. So in part it will inspire you, in part it will put fear inside you, but it's a really useful thing to get your head around, because a successful management case behind a COF project would mean your project anyway would stand a really good chance of success. Yeah, so there'll be a lot of detail in there, and you'll have plenty of questions, but if we can use the chat for questions, and then Gwyneth is watching the chat, and Gwyneth will call you in or verbalise the question at the relevant points. Okay, let me crack on and let me talk to you a little bit about Community Ownership Fund. So this is a UK government community programme. It's running for quite some time and began with a pot of £150 million. It's deployed probably about 20 of that, so there's still an approximate amount of £130 million still in the fund, and the underlining here is quite important. Take control of assets, amenities or facilities that are at risk of loss without community intervention. So it is really pay attention to that, at risk of loss without community intervention. The new prospectus just launched by the UK government, DLUHC, does now broaden what at risk means. So the obvious stuff that you'd have thought of with, assets at risk from closure or sale, so pubs being closed, banks being closed, community centres going up for sale, all that sort of stuff you'd understand as being at risk, and they still are very firmly in the heart of this. But the door's been opened to consider risk arising from neglect and dereliction of the current ownership, to the costs of energy inefficiency that threaten that long-term sustainability. So that's a reflection of some of these cost of living concerns and rising fuel prices. And actually it opens the door to unsustainable current business models. Those latter 3 are relatively new justifications for at risk. They're still being worked at. There are plenty of questions around all of them, but it does create an opportunity for groups to think about what risk means. So the funding that's available from round 3, so the round 3 prospectus has just been published. Traditional stuff that you're aware of, if you've read the prospectus, this is up to £250,000 purchase or lease. A case can be made, it is in exceptional circumstances, but a case can be made, for that to go up to 1 million. Prior to this new prospectus, that was limited to just sporting assets. It's now available to all assets, but I'm going to reiterate it as exceptional. If you think you're in that category, pick up the phone and talk to us, send in an inquiry. The COF funds must be matched, but the match rate is now set at 20% from alternative sources. So that's a lower hurdle to step over, but it's still not insignificant for some of the size of the assets we're talking about. And it's worth noting that within COF, up to 50%, up to £50,000 or 20% of your COF award, if you were successful, can be used for revenue for project development costs. So that's quite useful to know. How to apply? I'm going to take it. I'm going to flip through these quite quickly because if I'm hoping a number of you done your homework on the site. It's a sort of 2-stage process, EOIs, and that's checking eligibility. That's done by DLUC. That can be done at any time. Yeah, if you pass it, you've got access to a unique application form in your name and number. For those of you who've put previous EOIs in and are considering the new terms, no need to submit a new EOI. If you've got an EOI and it's still relevant, your application form reference is still live. And at the moment, we are aiming for 4 funding rounds a year. And we've just opened, COF have just opened, UK government have just opened round 3, bidding window 1. And that went public on the 31st of May. The window for applying goes live on the 31st of May and closes on the 12th of July. I'm going to make a very precise point here. If you're making that application by that 12th of July deadline, 12 means 12 noon. Please don't fall into the trap that a number of groups have fallen into previously, which think that's 12 midnight, and therefore missing it by 12 hours. And it's worth noting now that that programme is open until March 2025, aiming for about 4 rounds a year. So this isn't a sprint, even though this round is open. Think very hard about your timings and what works for your group. And also note that unsuccessful groups can reapply, and there's now no limit on that. Okay, so whilst it's not a rolling programme, the windows are open often enough and quickly enough to make it feel a bit like that, but EOIs are open at any time. So at the outset, I introduced myself as Adam from Development Trust Association Wales, and we act as the coordinating point here in Wales, but we are not alone. So we are part of a consortium of 10 across the whole of the UK. You can see all those logos there. And whilst being in contact with Development Trust Northern Ireland might not be relevant to you, the ones to the right, Plunkett, Co-ops, Cooperatives UK, Sporting Assets, Compass are all relevant. And there are other people, agencies in Wales who we're collaborating with, such as Coalfields Regeneration Trust, about how we get stuff done here in Wales. So we are technically DLUC's official delivery partner. Feels like I'm an official sponsor of the Olympics when I say that. And we're here to provide effectively a support package to those groups who define as having a good line of sight of a good application into the COF fund. So this is really about making sure that there is quite a high bar in terms of the quality of the application going into COF, and our role is to help groups get over that bar. And 3 things in front of us for that. Really, there's stuff on the My Community website. That's a shared website across the UK, and definitely worth plundering for information and ideas and background and doing all your background reading. There's an advice service, which is us here in Wales for any questions about COF or the support available. And then along with partners like Compass, with the room here, there is the ability to put together in-depth support packages for groups with that good line of sight. So the in-depth support package isn't automatic. Yeah, it's there are a limited number of them to go around. They're for those groups in priority areas and with a good line of sight. But you start with the EOI to get that through. This is sort of pause point number one. I've not got the chat up and running. And I'll see what I can. For anybody who had any questions really about the COF program in its first instance. Gwyneth, I'm going to turn to you. And
yes, sorry, there are no questions in there at the moment, so let anyone raise their hand if they want to ask something.
Feel free to raise your hand if there are any questions you have around the COF program and its workings. I see a...
Yeah, I've got a question.
Far away.
If you put in, when you talk about the next bidding window opening on the 31st and closing on the 12th of July, would that be then, if we are accepted, if our application, invitation to put in a full application is accepted, which I think it is, does that mean we've got to have it in by the 12th of July noon?
If you have an EOI in and you're accepted, and therefore you've got access to an application form, your option is to get it in this window. You don't have to get it in this window, but if you are going to get it in this window, then you do have to get it in by that noon date. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You can wait for a second window to open later in the year. We don't know those dates, but if I was betting, I'd say late summer. But no, you don't have to do it.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you for answering that question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll crack on. And if a question does occur to you later, you're not barred from asking it. Really, what I wanted to do now was just take you through the fact there's some additional support here in Wales. And I was going to allow 3 speakers to speak up. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anybody drop into the Zoom call from the Welsh Government, but I will speak to their slide. And then we will invite Carly and Alan to talk about the next 2 bits, but they're going to talk to my slides. So let me get that right. So here in Wales, so one of the other things is match funding can be matched with, here in Wales is Welsh Government fund of the Community Facilities Programme. And that is a capital only grant, which is to help community groups buy and or improve community facilities. Yeah. So we have had a number of groups come through to us inquiring about facilities that are already in community ownership, yeah, and about improving. And that does fit with Community Facilities Programme. It does pose a question in the COF programme, who've said that they will look at funding premises at risk of dilapidations or energy bills. But the important things to know about the Community Facilities Programme, it is matchable. If it's small stuff under 25 grand, it's a 1-stage application. For the bigger programmes, it's up to 300, but obviously 2-stage process. They have something very similar to COF, which is that demonstration of community-led and relating to a well-used and much-needed community facility. That probably runs across, and their contact details are there. And those will go out with a copy of this presentation, and they're easily found on the website and easy to talk to. So worth noting. One little point to make is they are capital only. So if you have an interest and a need for revenue, then COF differs slightly in the sense that COF allows for a degree of revenue funding for community development, project development and support. And it's probably just to note that Community Facilities Programme funding can't go between financial years. Yeah, so they have funds for this year, and there are funds earmarked already for next financial year. But it's just being aware that if you're matching the two together, that you think very carefully about the bridge across the 2 financial years and when you're claiming various things. Carly, I'm going to ask you to come in, as a partly a variety to my voice, but actually to lead on these slides are taken from your Social Business Wales presentation. So they look slightly different, but you give me a shout when you're a slide to move, Carly. All yours.
There we are. Thanks, Adam. So hi everyone. I'm Carly McCreesh and I head up the Social Business Wales programme at Compass. And for those of you that don't know, Compass is a development agency that supports social enterprise development across Wales, and we deliver a programme which is funded by Welsh Government. From the 1st of April this year, we've had funding as part of a consortium with Development Trust Association Wales, Social Firms Wales Unlimited and WCVA to provide support to the sector. There is a social enterprise stakeholder group where all representatives from the organisations that are on the slide here meet up, and there is a vision and action plan which outlines a 10-year plan which looks at how us as development agencies will support the sector to grow and prosper over the next 10 years. So under the new programme, Welsh Government has supported, is a 2-year programme funded by Welsh Government from the Department for Economy and Transport, and we're part of the Business Wales family of support. So for some of those of you on the call may have heard of Business Wales, we are a sister programme which very much similar to the Business Wales model. We provide business support and to social businesses operating across Wales, both for startups and established businesses that are looking to grow, diversify or accelerate their businesses. So overall, social businesses, Business Wales can support a number of different legal structures, including cooperatives, mutuals, social enterprises and private businesses considering employee ownership as an option for succession planning. Going on to the next slide. So for the new Social Business Wales programme, we're already supporting a number of community ownership fund applications, and the new programme is different to previous programmes where we led as Compass. We're now running it as a consortium with the partners, Development Trust Association Wales, WCVA, Social Firms Wales and Unlimited. And part of the offer that we can provide is we can provide one-to-one business support for individuals or a group of individuals that are coming together to support and to set up a social business. So that can include things like business planning, financial planning, visioning, registering the business, providing advice on the roles and responsibilities of becoming a director, marketing, anything really from cradle to grave in terms of business support. And we can tailor our service really to the needs of businesses. We already work with, currently working with over 500 social businesses across Wales under our existing startup and growth programme, but under the new programme there'll be one kind of umbrella brand for Social Business Wales where all consortium partners will deliver support, and that contract is being led by Compass. As part of the contract as well, there'll be a peer mentoring service which will be delivered by Development Trust Association Wales, and that will be able to provide one-to-one or one-to-many support through a peer mentor service where we would match community organisations up with individuals or the individuals who've got maybe technical experience that they can share with groups, things like advice and being able to share their journey in terms of how they got to where they've got. So the mentoring service is very much led by peers, people in the sector who have been there and and worked and delivered services, similar services to yours previously. We also have support from Social Firms Wales and Unlimited to support equity, diversity and inclusion support. So that's for groups of individuals that are underrepresented. There is also specialist support from those partners and additional support for those facing barriers. So one of the things that we've learned from Social Business Wales is that we have a number of we've had a number of inquiries from people that perhaps have business support needs, further business support needs, that they may need for additional support, things like individuals who are neurodivergent. So we are able to provide a specialist tailor support that's in line with individuals who perhaps have trouble or have had issues accessing mainstream business support historically. And also as part of the programme, we're able to provide climate change support. So there'll be an advisor operating within Social Business Wales 2, which will be able to provide advice on areas such as becoming net zero, advising you as individuals about how you can support your community venture and embed net zero principles within the business from the offset, to encourage all the businesses we're working with to be looking at triple bottom line when they're setting and growing businesses, which include, looking at the impact on the environment and the climate. And the other element is economic resilience, where we'll be able to support individuals, and there's a market development function within the Social Business Wales where we biannually undertake a mapping research of the sector, and from our findings we're able to map and to plan really and listen to the sector to be able to make sure that our services are aligned to what the sector's needing, and that's a reactive service. But things we've got planned up and coming from a recent mapping survey was that the sector is telling us that access to finance is still difficult, so we're making sure that the service is interlinked with key financial providers like Community Ownership Fund, Community Facilities and WCVA offer. Other areas that have come out of the mapping is things like networking. So as part of the project, we'd like to create networks across the sector so that individuals can come together and share their experiences and learning across Wales. And that's probably the last slide for me, Adam. Is that correct?
That is. Thank you, Carly. And actually, in giving all that detail, it reminds me that I should have said perhaps a little bit more about the in-depth support inside of COF. I think that the relevant point here is that inside of Wales, whether you're asset-based or not asset-based, the Social Business Wales support programme offers the ability to get some of that one-to-one advice from a business advisor, from peer mentoring and so on, and is there irrespective of whether you're developing an asset. But what I would say is, for those of you who are taking on assets, one of the key questions that will be asked by the UK government as part of getting over the hurdle of applying into COF will be about your business case. Yeah, so it's an encouragement to make use of every resource available. Inside of COF, the in-depth support does allow us to give 4, 6, 8 days of support from across the partnership, and a lot of that can be around the business case underpinning an asset transfer. So it's about making full use of both what is available in Social Business Wales and inside of the COF support package. What I should have said, and one difference between COF support and Social Business Wales. Social Business Wales is all about providing people support. There's no cash support inside of Social Business Wales. It's about giving you access to good advice, good support system, as Carly has outlined. Inside COF, for those groups going into an in-depth support package, there is the opportunity to talk to your advisor on that, about accessing up to £10,000 worth of small grant, which is really about aspects such as good condition surveys, good estimates for building restoration works, initial architect's drawings, those sorts of things. So there is a little bit of access to some cash as you go through that COF in-depth support. So very much being aware that both of these sit side by side and can support each other. I'm going to introduce Alan Jones from WCVA to you, and let Alan explain his role and He's not necessarily diving in with the in-person support, but he has something quite interesting that might be relevant to all COF applicants. Alan.
Thanks, Adam. So as you see the slide, I luxuriate in the title of Head of Social Investment at Wales Council for Voluntary Action. If those are, you aren't aware of who we are, we're the sort of umbrella, the lead body for the voluntary sector in Wales. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the loan offerings that we provide. We exist for market failure, so to provide loan facilities to the sector, which traditionally struggles to get similar through more traditional means. So just to say, really, yeah, I'm not talking about grant. This is repayable, and as such, probably comes with a bit more flexibility than some of the rest of it. And really, just to say here how you might be using it, because obviously your preference is going to be if people are going to give you a grant, then that's what you want to be taking. But there is a part that repayable finance can play in this, and that could be simply to begin with as far as the match is concerned. You've got to find that extra 20%. So if you haven't got it lying around down the back of the sofa or whatever, it's quite possible that we can lend you the match to get you in the game. Similarly, bridging finance, once you're actually starting on the project, and it may be there's a certain amount of building work or whatever, and you've got probably a patchwork of other grants as well as COF involved in it. Some of these may well pay in arrears. Or it might be just that you're worried about the timing of when you're going to have to pay the builder and when you're going to be able to draw the grant monies down. So having a facility there to bridge some of that cash flow uncertainty might well be something that you want to consider. And I've written here underwriting. If you're bidding in for grants with even if they've got similar sort of decision making timeframes, you can't guarantee you're going to get them. And it could be that you get two of them and not the third. And because you've not got the third, you've got a shortfall. Well, or it may well be that you could be running a community share offer at the same time. And by the time the grant comes through and when you've actually got to maybe buy the building, you haven't quite got enough through on the share offer. So what we've done quite a bit of is almost underwriting either some of the grant applications or the community share offers, so that if you don't get as much money as you're hoping for, there's a loan there to fall back on. It may be that the other money flows through afterwards, or you may never need it, but it gives you that bit of extra peace of mind to go through and know that you can continue things. And then the fourth bit here is just about cash flow and the extras. Yeah, so COF, the revenue funding is capped, and at could be a relatively low level. But what else will you need cash for? Especially if you get in the building and you're going to have to trade, it's going to be a little while while you build up capacity to get through. Do you need a bit of cash flow help to get you through? So loans there to help you do with that. And then in terms of what we do, we are very local. Our team's scattered all over Wales, so there will be somebody who's quite near to you, and we'll come and see you and see what you're doing and try and get under the skin and understand what you're doing. Ac os dych rhywun yn eisiau gwneud popeth yn Gymraeg, we have a full Welsh language delivery service with it all. And the final bit to leave you with, really, I've used the word bespoke here. That's really to say we make it up as we go along, really, as far as the loans are concerned. It's what you need to fit what your circumstances are. So our team will have a good conversation with you to work out what that loan needs to look like so that it does the work that you need it to do, rather than trying to force a particular shape of debt on you. So the contact details are there. Drop us an email, give us a call if anybody wants to have a chat, and we'll see what we can do to help. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you very much, Alan. In a minute, we'll open up some questions, and we have Alan until 2 o'clock. I suppose to provide sort of embark on the next little bit of where those extra little bits of support are, I just want to reflect a bit on by chance, a very good chance, the timings around what we're looking at in terms of support programs work really quite well for us. COF runs until March 2025. That's very good. We know that the Welsh Government's Community Facilities Programme has funding in it for this financial year and next financial year, so again through to March 2025. And we know that the Social Business Wales contract is confirmed all the way through to March 2025 with the potential extension for 3 more years. So actually, for those people coming forward, and Alan is bespoke, so he's around almost all time with his loan offers. So what we do know is that we're quite well placed here in Wales, just with that level of support to support groups, both in terms of particularly around the business planning side and making sure you're viable. And that's a really important point to reiterate, both going for COF and indeed, I suspect, when going for a loan, for all parties to be sure about the ability to repay. Yeah, on that. At this point, I owe an apology to Hannah, who's on the call with us from Compass. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff going on elsewhere in the UK of bespoke interest. But as part of my apology to Hannah, I'm going to go first in talking about a particular strand of Compass's work on community shares. Hannah, do you want I didn't do your slides, so I'm sorry, you're just going to have to talk to what's in front of you.
That's fine, no worries. Thanks, Adam. Hi everyone, my name's Hannah and I work on the Community Shares project at Compass. In case any of you are thinking of doing community shares as a part of the match funding needed for the COF grant, just some information for you in how to access our support and what our support is. So we offer full support for community share offers, and that includes starting out at scoping out ideas, whether it's right for you, through to the development of the necessary documents needed to run a share offer, and post-offer support as well. Similar to Social Business Wales, we also provide mentoring, where practitioners or peers who've been there, got experience of running community share offers, can offer support to you. And we also offer standard mark accreditation, which is a mark of best practice for all your documents regarding share offers. Just for some information, the Community Shares project we've been running at Compass currently, our clients have raised just over 2 million in community shares, and in addition, they levered in an additional 2 million. So just for you to get an idea of the kind of amounts that people are raising through community shares, but also how much you can use a community share offer to lever in additional money from grants. If you have any questions, I'm sure Adam will put our details through to anyone. But if you are thinking of a community share offer, please get in touch and we can offer bespoke to support to any of you interested. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. And probably a bit of comfort to everybody on the webinar. We're not just putting these up in front of you and then abandoning you to a dozen different pieces of contact details and information. One of the things we're asked to do in terms of delivering COF here in Wales is to get this coordinated. So you'll be pleased to know that behind the scenes there's an increasing level of chat amongst the partners, really about ensuring that the right support package is in front of the right groups at the right time, and calling in a range of stuff. What I want to do with just the slide that's in front of you is I don't know if you can speak. There's a number of things on this slide that are completely irrelevant to us here. Yeah. So what goes on in Scotland? Interesting, but not very helpful. Northern Ireland, actually very interesting, but not directly relevant. And I just wanted to touch on sort of the 3 or 4 who've got names that you may not have come across, just so you know who else is in the gang. I'm going to talk about 3 of them, and then there's a couple of slides to come, and Adam Hitchings will talk particularly about AHF. And indeed, he can explain what AHF is. Just so that you have a sense that if you have a certain need, certain area of sort of project development need that other people in the gang you can help. Sporting assets probably do what they say on the tin. They're a group UK wide, but we don't see much of them in Wales, whose expertise and experience is in that idea of assets of a sporting nature. So if you're on the call today and you have something that is around sport and sports development, it may well be that sporting assets have a role to play in supporting that augments and adds to what we already know here in Wales. Or actually have good relationships with Sports Wales and a number of the big sports development bodies in Wales. The one that's called shared assets, in some respects similar to what Hannah's described in terms of specialism in assets and community asset, but theirs is particularly around land. So a specialism in terms of community asset development for food production, for green space development, nature conservation, wildlife reserves, those sorts of things. So not restricted to that, but again, we can call upon their skills and experiences. And Cooperatives UK, probably a little bit, somebody they do what they say on the tin, a UK-wide body dedicated to the support and the development of cooperatives. So immense experience, as we also have here in Wales, in terms of model rules, establishment of cooperatives, management of cooperatives, share offers around cooperatives, and the like. So those three are around the table with us as we do the community ownership fund support package. I'm going to touch on two now that probably more prevalent in Wales, and we have an apology from Plunkett who couldn't be with us today. But Plunkett, many of you may have come across the name, some of you might know very well indeed, but a UK-wide charity, very much around rurality and rural areas, and probably back many of the values that we've all got around resilient and thriving communities. And they've done a lot of work around working with groups on local communities with democratic control, particularly in areas of pubs, shops, woodlands, farms. Probably reinforces their rural background. So very well established, very well experienced, very available to us, and already doing some work in Wales on a couple of groups looking to take over their local pubs. Yeah, and we don't have the information on the screen in front of us, but we can make sure we share it. We're about to do a dedicated session on bringing community shops and pubs together in Wales, in that idea of a network that Carly touched on. So to make you aware of Plunkett, very interesting group, very capable group, very available to us. The next slide belongs to Adam Hitchings, who's with us in person, which is great to have. Adam, the floor is yours to explain AHF.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so again, like Plunkett, we're a charity who had been going since the late 70s. Initially started off with loans to building preservation trusts to restore historic buildings and then sell them at hopefully a profit, and then reinvest that going forward and saving other properties. In the last 15 years in particular, the grant side of the business has really picked up, and as the strapline says, we exist to support communities, charities and social enterprises to find sustainable, viable uses for historic buildings. So with historic buildings, yes, we do mean that they are listed. They might be located in conservation areas, but also they could be historic but have no legal designation attached to them as well, basically. So we are open to discuss what those buildings might be and how we might be able to help out with some very early stage support as well. And one thing which we have been doing for the last 10 years or so is providing very early project stage support, looking at option appraisals, feasibility studies, viability studies, and then where a viable option has been identified, we can then work on providing more support then with development grants from both an architectural perspective, working through the different REBA stages, but as importantly as well, working through the business plan as well to make sure that the financials stack up and that the enterprise is going to be successful from a financial perspective going forward as well. Just wanted to draw attention, we are holding a webinar on the 14th of June in the morning. So again, you can sign up via the My Community website to that. And obviously we'll be focusing on the types of projects we support generally, but also the projects which can benefit from applying to the Community Ownership Fund as well. And briefly speaking, where we see the added value we bring is that organisations can apply to us first before then applying to COF, and by doing that, very early stage studies, they can make really compelling, strong applications to COF and other funders, where they can demonstrate that when there's a need and demand for the different uses which could be held within that historic building, but also then they have the type of evidence to back up those claims as well. So we see that as being like a preemptive strike before putting in those applications to COF and other funders as well. What I'll quickly do in the chat as well, earlier today we launched our new 5-year strategy. So I'll just copy and paste the links to that in the chat so you can see that afterwards, as well as a link to the Wales page as well, where you'll find all the information relating to the grant support we provide as well. So there's a couple of links there, hot off the press. Our new 5-year strategy is not revolutionary, it's similar to what we've done before, but there's more emphasis and a spotlight put on how can historic buildings be restored, and as part of that restoration, how can climate change measures be sensitively and sympathetically integrated into those schemes as well. And the other thing we're looking at, giving a bit more of a focus to, is social housing within historic buildings as well, whether that's be in city centre locations, town centres, or in more rural locations as well. So I cover the whole of Wales, so a lot of travelling, but it's a really good opportunity to get out and meet groups to see what they want to do with those historic assets.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Adam. I'm just going to tease out a couple of things. So what I would reflect if I was sitting in this webinar is, well, that's a lot of agencies doing lots of things, and I can see quite a lot of overlaps. I think in part that's true. I think what's probably reassuring is that all those agencies and organisations like AHF, ourselves, Compass, Co-ops UK are all talking to each other. And what I would say is, as the COF programme, for those groups who become eligible for in-depth support, if you think you need a bit of something, we can mix and match, in being able to provide groups with 6, 8, 10 days of direct support. That can come as a mix and match package from across the consortium. So if you think you need a bit of sporting assets support or a bit of heritage insight, I think the broad thrust, though, Adam, if I'm right in thinking, is where you're dealing with an asset that is first and foremost heritage orientated. It's got big heritage capabilities. That actually an early conversation with Adam's quite worthwhile, particularly as they have. Is it called viability? Grant?
Yes, we get 2 grant offers within Wales. The first one is project viability grants of up to £10,000 to look at different options for future uses for an historic building. And then the next level of grant then is up to £20,000 to look at them working through the different architectural stages and business planning support as well. But as Adam just referenced, there's lots of other organisations on this call who can help with the business planning side of things as well. And we do, if you look at an historic pub, for example, that's a really good example of where ourselves, Compass and Plunkett have been involved at different stages, supporting a community to get that community facility into community ownership, and community shares can form part of that fundraising package alongside our grants. And just to touch upon what Alan was mentioning as well from WCVA, we still offer still offer loans as well, and my colleagues in the investment team work with Alan on the social investment UK panel as well. So there's lots of information being shared, lots of intelligence being shared. The key thing is really to get that expression of interest in via COF, and then we can do the straw pulling behind the scenes as to who takes the lead in providing that support at the first step, really.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and a sort of reflection that, you know, for a broad reflection across all of this. And it's very good that this is called the Community Ownership Fund and doesn't necessarily carry the title community assets. Buildings are of course assets, yeah, but they are also significant liabilities, particularly those with big heritage interests. So as much early prep as possible is advised to every group, yeah, particularly those with big heritage assets that they're taking on. As we're about to talk you through sort of the meatier part of preparing the management case inside of any COF application. What's my warning? This might feel a bit, this is really about getting across to you the breadth and the depth of what's required. And I don't want anybody on the call here to walk away thinking, oh, doom and gloom, that's a lot, that's an awful lot. That's just not. The sense is this is quite a tall order, yeah, but so is taking on a community asset, and putting the work in now when there is access to in-depth support packages from COF, when there's access, if you're a social enterprise, to Social Business Wales, is the right thing to do. It's a good thing to do at this time. Reminder that this is not a sprint. You don't have to hit the current COF window. There will be other windows later in the year. So as we go through this, there's an awful lot in here. What I would say also is a lot of what is in here has come from feedback. There's been quite a lot of discussion between applicants who've gone before you, who've been accessing that £20 million that's gone out of the COF fund, and DLUC, the UK government's department dealing with this. So a lot of what you're hearing and seeing on the screen, the next sort of 20 odd slides, yeah, and there are 20 of them, is based on that level of experience. So a bit of a warning and awareness, but don't be disheartened by what you're about to do. I'm just going to close the window because you can probably hear a strimmer going on outside. All right, let's try that. So, and apologies, you're going to get quite a lot of me talking at you. Gwyneth, feel free to watch the chat. If there's anything particularly pertinent, do feel free, or somebody stick their hand up. It's not a wait for everything to the end, but if we can get through it, that'd be really good. We have sort of a lot of emphasis inside of making an application into COF is around the management case. The majority of groups that have failed COF applications up to now have been failed because of what they call the management case. The management case inside the application is a very broad area, so it's really quite hard to pin it down. So let's see how we get on. Let me talk you through the thing called the management case. Yeah, and the 4 elements inside of that: funding breakdown, financial risks, forecasts and risks, resources and skills of the group, and representation. And what we're really going to do in the next sort of half an hour is look at, you know, what makes a strong application, what they're actually looking for, what the information is, and some of that underlying information documentation that you're going to have to provide. Yeah. So points to bear in mind as we go through this. Yeah, you can't go back. Once you've submitted, you've submitted. Yeah. Reminder that if you do get rejected, you can go back with a full application, but you can't go back on the application that you've pressed submit on. There is a limited number of attachments. There are some good workarounds around that, and it's worth talking to us around what those workarounds are. But a number of groups got really frustrated, omitted information, indeed 1 or 2 failed to submit because they couldn't get it all in the megabyte limit and the number of attachments. But prep ahead, take advice. There are shortcuts to that. Do use comparisons, examples, yeah, and don't assume that the assessors know anything about you. Usual stuff, but really obvious stuff, yeah. And there is a scoring matrix. Download it, get to know it, understand it. because it gives you a number of steers about where you should be paying attention. So some of that I think is probably sort of broad general stuff around anybody going for any application, but particularly applies here in relation to COF. So just a sense of two of those assessment criteria and the sub-criteria and the weightings. So that sense that there's more, you scratch the surface, there's more below it. So on a strategic case, yes, that evidence of community use, definitely the benefits, double weighting on being able to show the benefits and double weighting on being able to show you've engaged. Yeah. So it's a sort of read my lips bit. Yeah. COF have said they want to support assets that are at risk and have a community use. And they really mean that issue of community use and community benefits. Yeah. You can't just shoehorn a good idea into a building without having done the homework that says my community really wants this. Yeah. And again, potential reason why you might want to make use of AHF or Social Business Wales and not sprint at a COF application. I'm personally disappointed that environmental sustainability is only a 0.6 weighting, but you can't, it's there. So yeah, pay attention to it. And the management case. The one to pay attention to on the management case is as they will ask for awful lots of details on that funding breakdown, on the skills and the resources. Pay attention, financial risks and forecasts. They want to know that you've looked ahead. Yeah, we all know. Well, we all know it. One of the things that comes to pass is acquiring the building is potentially the easy step here. Running the building in the future as a viable enterprise, as a viable activity, is where it gets really hard. COF know this, yeah, and are weighting it in saying, go and identify those financial risks and those financial forecasts, yeah. So there's some heads up around what you can expect. So a quick reminder: budget can't be changed off submission. You can't incur, well, you can incur costs before any application window are awarded, yeah, but it won't be classed as eligible. DLUC will take a legal charge on the building, but as we touched on in the conversation with Alan, you know, you can have a live conversation about that. COF is subject to procurement rules. Once you start getting into this, how things are tendered, and indeed, whilst we don't use the same language used to use in the European Union in terms of de minimis and funding, there is assessment of how much public money you've had over the last 3 years. So bear both of those things in mind. And actually, ironically, a number of groups fail because they've got directors who've been disqualified in the past. So just check before you walk through the door of COF that everybody on your board is fit for purpose. I won't spend a lot of time on the glossary of terms because I suspect around the room assets, capital, revenue, contingency. Anybody who's done anything with assets now understands what contingency really means. In the world of inflation that we currently have, contingency is even more important. Yeah, it's not just a fund that you can call on, it probably will get called on in the current world of inflation in building materials. Yeah. And I'm going to reinforce the point Alan made. Yeah. And to reinforce, when you look at your cash flows going forward, you look at your forward planning, it will be cash flow and liquidity that will upset your project. Yeah. As much as anything else. Yeah. And delays because you haven't got cash flow sorted, yeah, will be costs incurred if you delay a builder or an architect. So yeah, just some of the things that will trip us up. Let me move on from that. So acquiring the asset, obviously this is what it's really about, and it's acquiring it as freehold or long-term secure lease. Yeah, David, this potentially talks to your point. Yeah, that obviously has to be an agreed price. It has to be an independent valuation. Yeah, so it can't just be what you say, and behind it needs to be those agreements to sell and transfer. So you want something which is a letter of comfort, an option to purchase, something that gives reassurance to both the group this is worth the effort, and indeed to COF when awarding the money, that it's not just you know, a chat down the pub with the local authority officer saying, yes, I've got an asset in, you can have the old bowling green or whatever. Yeah, and that agreement to sell and transfer giving a timetable that deals with it. Yeah. goes back to issues around if you're managing funding, particularly if Wales, if you're looking at matching between COF and community facilities programme, timetables will be crucial to you. And as you get advice, it will pick up on there will be issues which affect acquisition. There'll be searches, yes, there'll be permissions, and so on and so forth. But don't forget refurbishing. Yeah, acquiring an asset is only really the first step. Having it in a fit state to work and do the job you wanted to do. And this is even more important now if what you're looking at doing is with COF opening up the criteria to deal with dilapidations on a building already in community ownership. It is the refurbishment that becomes even more important. Some of the same stuff there. That detail of professional advice is still relevant, getting the proper costings in, milestones, timetables. We've changed the language on this slide a little bit, but fundamentally it still rolls back the same, is plan ahead, know who's doing it for you, and have a sense of the costings being as nailed down as they possibly can be. Yeah. So when getting this across to COF, yeah, so they will ask for a lot of detail. You won't be able to put in a global figure saying, I just want £220,000. They'll want to know every line in the way that you, and as project managers of a capital program, will want to know every line. So they're going to want to know what they're going to, what you're going to want from COF, as well as what is available from match funding. A reminder here that in applying to COF, you can apply for capital and revenue. Revenue is up to 20% of your total COF application, or max amount to get £50,000. And they're going to want to know about your match funding. In looking back at the number of the applications that have gone through, a whole raft of EOIs were either rejected outright or were put on a sort of a watch list because they weren't affirmative when answering the question about have you got match. Having match as cash in the bank is really quite hard to achieve. Having match as a letter from the lottery or a letter of grant aid from or loan from Alan is really nice to have. Having match in the terms of I've got an application in, or I've got a letter of comfort from a local authority, is all really helpful. So it's about being clear about that you do have match in the pipeline and its status, but absolutely being clear that you do have match in the pipeline. If you don't, yeah, you'll end up with some sort of kickback from the EOI process. Yeah, but it's about being brave and confident about where that match is coming from, and ultimately you'll have to evidence it. And obviously that links into that timescales for securing that outstanding match funding. And I'm going to remind you, bear in mind that Alan's available, as are other banks available, and community lenders for chats around what bridging finance looks like. So some stuff that sounds obvious and is reiterating. So what we'll class as a strong application: full costs, no issues with eligibility, all match secured, project plan milestones, yeah, purpose of revenue, being as clear and as confident as you can in putting those applications in, yeah. The phraseology that the COF team use is they want to see applications with a good line of sight of success, a good line of sight. So you need to be able to show the person who's reading this, which is the COF team. It's not me, it's not any of the people who are on this call today. Yeah, we're here as support teams, but the people who are going to read this, that you can see a clear line of sight to them saying yes. So if you write anything down, write clear line of sight. So the big area, financial risks and forecasts, had a double weighting. Yeah. So make use, if you're doing a heritage asset, make use of Adam Hitchings and AHF and completed and planned feasibilities. Yeah. You remind it, don't feel that because the window is open now that you need to sprint a COF application. Yeah. Unless there is an imminent pressure on the building, yeah, or a real urgent need inside the business, yeah, the community business, then this for me is one where you take your time and you get it right. Those financial forecasts, very detailed. Yeah, again, COF support package can lend support in helping those get shaped with those cash flow forecasts. And if you're going to identify, there's absolutely no problem whatsoever in identifying risks. Yeah, be clear, there are risks. If you don't table any risks, then anybody reading your application will worry. Yeah, because there are risks attached to every single one of these projects. So do feel free to risk them, but also make sure you think through the mitigations and the actions you will take to minimize those risks. Oh, I went one slide on too far. And I'm going back to my caution on the whole of this section, which is, it sounds very heavy. This is a relatively high bar for a capital program, but it is worth doing the work to make your project right. So one of those high bars will be the information and the underpinning documentation that COF will ask of you. Yeah, income and expenditure budgets, capital and revenue forecast, sensitivity analysis, risk register. So be prepared to start building your dossier sooner rather than later, and understanding the breadth and the depth of what's going to be required. And underpinning evidence, often missed out. I'm going to just touch on really that operational, those ones coming down on the operational plan, customer markets, competition, pricing. They aren't necessarily to do with the acquisition of the building. They're to do with how you will make the building financially viable when you've got it and operating it. Yeah, you know, and as much attention will be paid to, are you putting forward a good business case for how you're going to run the building, as opposed to, here's a really good community need and here's a building and I'm just putting the two together. That probably won't suffice. You need the business case in the middle that says, this is how this community is going to make use of that building to make money and pay the bills. So these are just some examples. Some of the stuff that they might expect, we might expect, your board might expect to have in any proposition for any large sum of money. So if you're running that community cafe, it is a question of number of customers, average spend, how many days per month, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So this basically on this left-hand column is, in my building, what are my income streams? This one is a cafe. It's got room hire. It's got managed workshop space. Yeah. It's got a contract, a welfare rights contract. These were just some of the details sit behind it. So it's not to be read in detail. It's just to take a glance at and get a sense of how far down you're going to have to go in terms of being sure that you've got a project that will stack up. I know, so if we're going to do caretaking cleaning, it's how many hours and at what rate per hour, what are your utility bills and so on. Yeah. Some stuff that actually gives a great deal of comfort to any board as well as to any funder as you step into taking on an asset. So some of the stuff that we've touched on already, really, having that down inside a clear business plan, and being clear on those risks and those mitigations and that cash flow forecast all come into play. And the phrase at the bottom here, excellent detailed on planned activities and services. So excellent doesn't mean long. Yeah, it's just being clear and to the point and being able to say that the person who's reading this doesn't know you, doesn't know your location, doesn't know your community. So it's that reminder that, and always a good check is have somebody from outside of your organization read and review, yeah, your business plan, your application before submission, which leads on to the take your time to get this right. So there's a question here about skills and resources. So one of the bigger risks, one of the risks attached to any community asset transfer or community ownership proposal is really about the people who are going to do that. In fact, it's really all about the people, not just the community you're about to serve, but effectively who you are on your committee, your executive team. And the top one, which it can be a bit of an off-putting thing, because what this is trying to do is encourage communities to step forward and take on community assets. And then you get this first line which says relevant experience of delivering a similar project. Well, if you've not done it before, you know, if you want people who've not done it before to come forward and do it, it's a bit of a catch-22. I think this is where, you know, the use of peer mentoring, the use of being in the system of the COF support program begins to help out, because it's not it's also not directly about the skills that you have of doing community ownership. It could be in any form of walk of life. Where are those transferable skills? Anybody on your group who's got commercial property experience and the like. So it's being creative and saying, well, where have I got those skill sets, even if it's not called community ownership? And thinking now about the board that you have and the board that you need and the roles required to manage those assets as you go forward. And this is specifically where either through the Community Ownership Fund support programme or indeed through something like Social Business Wales or that early viability work with AHF, these things get teased out really quite early on. You'll find that any of us on the call here in the support team, we focus an awful lot on things like, governance, and sort of confidence and competence of the people going forward. And it's far better to address those issues early on than it is when a problem arises. So some of the stuff that you're going to have to prep and be prepared to submit are things like your board profiles, their CVs, some of the track records of the organisation. If you feel that there's nothing to stop a brand new organisation coming through and putting its hand in the air, that's not excluded whatsoever. I think how you begin to evidence its corporate CV and its track record then becomes about who's on the board and who's in the executive team, maybe who you're partnering with, who's traveling this journey with you. So don't feel put off about it if you're a young organisation or you're thinking of setting up an organisation specifically to do this. Do think about, where do I get help? Who do I travel this journey with? Brings you back into submitting EOIs, talking to us and getting that early steer. There will be a lot of work on things that look quite fearful, called policies and procedures and systems. There's a lot of good practice to be begged, borrowed and stolen from around the sector. So be aware that you need it and that you need to start working on it early on, but please don't let it be off-putting. It's one of those where it's just ask for help. And there are some substantial resources across in the My Community website, across any of the organisations on the call today, to help with those sorts of things. So I'm back to my point about, this is in part designed to, it's not designed to scare you. I'm conscious it will put some fear into the minds of some people on this call. But that being aware of it early on and knowing its breadth and depth is important, and knowing that the people who can help you. So I think I'm beginning to repeat some of the points made. And as we share this presentation and you go back and read this and you read some of the guidance, these are areas where other groups have fallen in terms of their submissions into COF. So strong evidence of recruitment plans that are well progressed. That doesn't mean you have to have the job advert out, but it does mean you need to have drafted the job description and know what roles they're going to do. The board, its current board, if there are plans to grow the board, evolve the board, having those sort of clearly outlined, become important. That track record and proven skills of managing a similar project. So it doesn't mean that you or your organisation have to have done a project of such a similar nature, but it's where you go and borrow those skills and experiences from. All of those become relevant. And when we talk about representation and inclusiveness, you will all have different ways of talking to your community, of recording their views, and of feeling that you have a group that is rooted, a proposal that is rooted in its community. I think the question you have to ask yourselves with this one is, how do I evidence that? So some of the stuff that you might experience on a day-to-day basis on the front desk of your organisation, or in the pub, or when walking down the high street, all that stuff that affirms what you're doing is correct, is right, is needed, is wanted. That's stuff that those are experiences, and that's knowledge and know-how that the COF team aren't going to have. So back to thinking about, how do I make that visible? How do I make that accessible to somebody reading this application? Simply saying, this project is needed, this is a deprived area, all those sorts of statements won't work. And that's both in terms of how it's needed, and this one about how it will be operated and accessible to the whole of the community going forward. It's one of the areas where there are several church groups exploring the COF, and the biggest challenge to most church groups coming through, not all, but most church groups, is about making sure their asset is open and accessible and indeed influenceable by that wider community. So it applies as just as much to everybody else. Yeah. So stuff that is required, yeah. Some of it's policy orientated, some of that is evidence behind it, and it will begin to test out the membership and the governance structure of your organisation. So can the users of the of your service have a say in how you are run and your fault? That doesn't mean they have to be members, it doesn't mean you have to be a cooperative. You can have softer ways of dealing with that, but having thought it through, yeah. If you imagine what COF are trying to achieve here, it is a lot of money they're paying out in terms of acquiring and securing physical buildings. They're really quite keen that this is rooted in a community group, and that community group is rooted in its community. Yeah, so you have to think sort of 1 or 2 steps along the pathway here. And you're back to also areas of risk here, that idea in the bottom bullet point, which is in any barriers to inclusiveness. There may well be barriers, there almost certainly will be barriers, but some sense of how those barriers will be dealt with over time. So they're wanting every group who's coming through to have sat and have thought about the bid they're putting in. And therefore what makes a strong application is sort of evidence of most of that. So evidence of how that community has been involved. So you do have to think about, what do I mean by evidence? Is it something I've done in terms of a survey? Is it the feedback forms on the desk? Is it statistical evidence from my local authority, and so on and so forth? And I will highlight one that says membership structure with no barriers, proactive. Yeah, so it does begin to make every group think about its democratic status and how it is engaging those communities. So you can sort of imagine that one of the things that's coming through here is using a capital grant to instigate and drive, sort of openness and inclusiveness of the groups that are coming forward and the engagement with communities. Yeah, so the money comes when evidence is there that the community group is open and inclusive and engaging, and the service is meeting the community's needs. Yeah, so it sort of slightly reinforces that sense that this is quite a high bar to get over to get into COF. Yeah, there's a lot of work to go in ahead of it. But most of it will be really worthwhile doing, because it will make the organisation, the service, and the asset much more viable. So we end up with the sort of the top tips coming through. Do the research, yeah. Take time, do the research, make use of the support packages that are available to you, yeah. Many groups are really quite experienced, and some of them are very capable of doing this alone. But if you feel that you're not in that category, reach out, put in that EOI, make an inquiry, and let's see what support we can get you, so that you have a good line of sight of a really good application. Yeah. And therefore, in terms of doing the research, is start early, yeah, or don't sprint, don't rush. The purpose of going fast in this will probably only be because you've been given a very clear timeline around that asset being disposed of. And even at that point, it's just a call to one of us helps enormously if that's the case. Provide explanations. Yeah. Reminder, COF read everything. They're really quite diligent on all of this, but they are not you, they are not us, they don't live in your community. So provide explanations, and a good way of doing that is that latter point, is get somebody else to read it. Yeah. Now these are really simple things. Prep ahead, do the research, don't assume anything that the reader knows anything, and get somebody to read it. Yeah. It's a very broad catch-all to all the detail I've just given you. Yeah. But actually probably are those top tips. And that brings me to a sort of a final slide, which is actually, this may well raise more questions than answers.